Well, good morning and welcome to the Treasury Select Committee Evidence session on UK customs. We're delighted this morning to be joined by Lord Agnew, and four officials who are supporting him during this hearing. And I'm going to start by asking Lord Agnew to very briefly introduce himself to the committee, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the Minister temporarily assigned to HMRC Border Readiness. I am a Joint Treasury Cabinet Office Minister.
Thank you very much and welcome to this session, Lord Agnew. Could I ask for a brief introduction from Sophie, please?
Yes, of course, Chair. I'm Sophie Dean. I'm Director General for Borders and Trade at HMRC. I'm one half of a job share.
Thank you, Sophie. And Emily, please.
Hello, I'm Emily Ancliffe. I am the Director for Indirect Tax at HMRC.
Thank you very much. And Sue, please.
Hello, I'm Sue Catchpole. I'm Director of Customs in HM Treasury.
Thank you. And Catherine, finally, please.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Green, the other half of the job share, Director General of Borders and Trade in HMRC.
Great. Well, thank you very much and welcome, everybody. So let's start with a question to Lord Agnew here. And I'd like to focus initially on the short straits and Dover in particular. So, of course, what we all know is that come the 1st of January, there will be the requirement for customs and various other checks to be made. We know that the French will clearly be bringing those in on day one. We will be providing some facilitations to make things a little bit smoother outside of the border for the first 6 months of next year. Nonetheless, there's no doubt that imports and exports are likely to be affected across the short straits after the end of this year. And the government's reasonable worst case scenario indeed suggests the possibility of 7,000 trucks in queues, 2-day delays. And there have been a number of surveys and reports suggesting that the exporters and importers themselves are not going to be sufficiently prepared, or rather not a large enough number of them will be sufficiently prepared on day one for everything to flow smoothly. We've got about 80 days left now, including the intervention of Christmas during that time period. And of course, we've got all the additional stresses of strains of the coronavirus. Are you satisfied, given that situation, that the UK will be in the right position to handle those customs requirements on day one?
Well, I think there are probably three parts to that question. The first is HMRC readiness and the customs systems.
Hello, have we lost Lord Agnew?
I can't hear the witness, Chair.
No. Lord Agnew, are you with us? I have a feet. I can't see Lord Agnew at all at the moment. Can I just ask?
See me now? Is the camera not working?
Lord Agnew, we can now hear you, but we can't see you.
Shall I press on? I'm sure you.
I think sure press on. As long as we can hear you, that's the main thing. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes. So did you hear the start of my answer? Or do you want me to go back?
We heard about a sentence. So I think you said there were 3 areas, and you were about to talk about HMRC readiness, I think.
Yeah. So the first area of those 3 are HMRC and customs readiness, and I believe we are in a reasonably good shape for that. The computer systems are all operating, and the sites are largely ready, not completely ready, but we have got sites, we have got good contingency with the backup of Manston, which is not ideal, but it can take large volumes. The French bit is it will be outside our control, and it is a concern to me that they won't be as ready as we would like, but that's something that I can't really answer in any detail. The last bit, though, that worries me the most is the trader readiness, and there has been a head in the sand approach by traders, which has been compounded by what I would call the quadruple whammy of 2 false alarms, so 2 extensions at the very last last minute, then followed by COVID, and now followed by the recession. So the traders are not as ready as they should be. And if there's one headline I hope that comes out of this appearance today, it is to send another shot over traders' bows to warn them that it is their businesses that are at stake from the 1st of January, and they really must engage in a more energetic way.
Okay, so let's just, if I could, focus on the third of those points, trader readiness, which, as you say, is absolutely essential. What steps are you taking to mitigate what appears to be a distinct possibility that many vehicle movements will head in the direction of Dover, for example, only to discover that they've not got the right paperwork, and then you've got this problem of loads of trucks which have to be stopped and that issue handled. What are you doing to try and avoid that eventuality?
Well, there are several strands to that. So we have campaigned hard for them all to get their EORI numbers, which is the crucial trading reference number that they need with customs. We have over 200,000 who are registered for that. We have a 100-person call centre in HMRC who are outbound ringing the 10,000 or so highest value traders of the cohort. So that is the large traders who do not have a rest of the world portfolios, so this will be a new experience for them, and so we are making several thousand calls a week, although I'm worried about the response we're getting on those calls, but I can come back to that. And then the last part of the equation is the smart freight app, which has been given a new name, but basically it is now released for beta testing amongst some trusted stakeholders, and that will allow drivers to basically go through a short questionnaire online, and they will be told whether they're ready or not. And to link to that will be a fining system if they arrive in Kent not ready. So the pieces of the jigsaw are coming together, but as I say, there just seems to be a lack of urgency on the part of too many traders.
Okay, well that may be the case. However, let's just look at the EORI numbers. So that 200,000 who have registered, what is your estimate of the total number that need to register in order to have everybody covered? Bearing in mind, of course, that my understanding is that those below the VAT threshold level and also a number of those that are trading solely intra EU 27 at the moment, i.e. aren't trading with the rest of the world outside of the EU, are more difficult to track. So it may be that you don't even actually know the answer to that question. But what is your estimate of the total?
Well, I'll defer to Catherine for a bit more detail, but there are about 100,000 sub-VAT traders. So we know that is about the size of the cohort. But it's also worth bearing in mind that a lot of those might only do one transaction a year, literally, very, very small. But Catherine will give you a little bit more detail.
Yeah, Catherine, of that 100,000, could I just very quickly ask then, of that 100,000, how many do you think have registered for an EORI number at the moment, please?
So what we do know is around 250,000 businesses in total at the minute trade with the EU, but don't trade with the rest of the world. So that is the total group that we care most about, that 250,000. Of that group, about 150,000 are VAT registered, so it is very easy for us to write out to them. We know their names, we know their addresses, and of course we are doing that. Yeah. But there are about 100,000 micro businesses. So the 250,000 is the target number, if you like, that we need to get EORI numbers. And as Lord Agnew has said, we have just over, I think it's 210,000 is the latest number. So we are not far off that target. We suspect the remaining 40,000 will be mainly the micro businesses that are not VAT registered. Now, what we're doing to reach them is obviously using a number of kind of national communication campaigns, and we're also working with some organisations such as eBay that we know work, obviously lots of micro traders are on eBay, in order to advertise what government is doing, because we are not able to write to those micro businesses directly. Okay,
thank you. So it sounds like of the 250, there's a shortfall of 40, and your suspicion is that, or your suggestion is that 40 contains largely the sub-VAT threshold group, as it were, of less frequent.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Can we just switch, Lord Agnew, to you mentioned the smart freight system, which is there as I think you've set out to just check before trucks go towards Dover, for example, that they have filled in all the necessary paperwork in order to avoid the kind of queues and problems that we've been discussing. But you've just said that it's in the beta phase of development. We're 80 days away from day one. We've got Christmas intervening. A lot of businesses with a lot of other things to do than think about these matters. Are you absolutely certain that that piece of software is going to be ready on time? And if the answer is yes, what does on time mean? When would the marketplace expect to be able to get their hands on this?
Well, the app was released, I think, literally this week to a handful of traders for their evaluation. So when I say in beta, we believe the product is ready to roll, but we have pushed, this is something that CDL has done, has pushed the border readiness team to get this out to traders so they can start evaluating it. So, I mean, I'm reasonably optimistic. I think it's not massively complicated. You know, this isn't something, it's not building another chief or anything approaching that order of complexity. So we will get the feedback over the next, I would say, 2 weeks, and that I'm sure there'll be some improvements that can be made to it as a result of that feedback. And then I would expect us to have fairly wide rollout by the beginning to middle of November. But I have to stress that's not an HMRC tool, so I don't want to kind of make a statement on behalf of somebody else. But just pragmatically, I think we are in a reasonably good place with that app.
Okay, so it sounds like I'd certainly accept your premise that this is not like reinventing Chief or CDS or any of these huge, great programs that take years. However, the experience of government and technology, whether it's an app or not, always seems to be that it takes longer than has far more unforeseen glitches than were first imagined. So what would be the consequences, therefore, if that app is not available in time for quick take-up by the marketplace? Presumably, thousands upon thousands of lorries descending upon Dover, for example, and some element of chaos here.
Well, I think it links back to my opening comments that if traders are ready and understand the paper trail that they have to follow, the smart app is merely icing on the cake. So it does link.
We're saying they're not ready, and it's one of your principal concerns is that they won't be ready. So to rephrase my question, if we don't have the app, and you're right about the state of unreadiness of the traders, then you've got a major problem with traffic descending on Dover, haven't you?
You have, absolutely right. And to be brutal about it, you know, how many times is a lorry driver going to drive into Kent, take a £300 fine, and then park up at Manston for 36 hours while he gets his paperwork sorted? Now, I mean, if that's what will happen, but I hope that to goodness that they won't do that more than once. So that is the consequence of not being ready. You turn up, you get a fine, you get parked in a holding bay while they sort your paperwork out. There will be congestion, and they might get sent back home because they haven't cancelled the paperwork out. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay, so can I move on to one of the other points that you raised, Lord Agnew, which is the infrastructure to handle the kind of scenario that you've described now, trucks being directed to somewhere while they sort their paperwork out. And you mentioned Manston, which of course is quite a long way from Dover. And you mentioned, I think, in your opening remarks that the various parts of this infrastructure were being developed and progress was being made, etc. How many, are we right in saying that the capacity that you would be seeking here for these trucks would be of the order of 7,000? Would that be a correct statement?
Well, that's considered, I think the term is the reasonable worst case scenario. So we certainly, I think in a normal run rate for early January, we wouldn't expect that level of movements, but we have to, as you will quite reasonably expect, we have to plan for the reasonable worst case. So that's what that figure is. And I'll defer to my team for more exact numbers of lorry capacity in the various physical sites. But I know I'm using Manston too much, because I entirely accept that it's not in a particularly good geographic position, but that alone will hold 4,000 lorries. So
is Manston ready to go as of now?
I'm going to say it's 85% ready to go. I mean, it was ready to go for our exit last year. Then of course, things got slipped with COVID, but they are fully on the case now, and I would put that level of readiness at around 85%, unless my team want to disagree with me.
Thank you, Lord Agnew and Chair. I would just say that, as Lord Agnew has said, that the traffic management element of this is obviously very important, and the Department for Transport have been consulting on their Operation Brock, which you'll remember they had up and running for October last year. From an HMRC perspective, the infrastructure that we need for January, remembering that we are staging in import controls, is primarily for transit. Transit is a facilitation, so it is optional for traders. And there are sort of three sources for handling your transit documents. There is, first of all, some of the ports who are putting in arrangements. The traders themselves can do their documents at their own premises if they become authorised as consignors and consignees. And then there are the HMRC inland sites that we're setting up. The committee will remember that for last October, we stood up a number of sites in Kent, Ebbsfleet and Ashford and North Weald. And so those are in place. And then we've got additional sites in Sevington and in Warrington. So the HMRC infrastructure is primarily focused for January on transit.
Okay, so if we step aside from transit for a minute and just focus on these more normal, if you like, movements between Dover and Calais, and we're in a situation where the app isn't ready and we've got lots of trucks snarling up the motorways, etc. We've got to put them somewhere because they're not ready for French customs. What level of infrastructure, apart from Manston, do we have in place to accommodate that situation at the moment? And what is the capacity, please, of that infrastructure?
Yeah, I'll let Sophie answer that, because there are around half a dozen sites, but I'll let Sophie just.
Yeah, and not to defer, but again, the traffic management element of this is really handled by Department for Transport, and that's the Operation Brock consultation that says how do we manage traffic flow if we get disruption from HGVs at the border.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So Brock sort of followed on from Stack, didn't it? So this is using the motorways and hard shoulders and all sorts of fucking people. Yeah, but we still got a need, have we not, where lots of people haven't got the paperwork to go somewhere in order to be processed and to wait. So my question is, what is the state of preparedness of that infrastructure? And what I think I'm hearing is that we're 85% there with Manston, that has a capacity of 4,000, but it's geographically not in a particularly favourable location. But what else is there in addition to that at the moment that's ready? So of these half dozen other sites, etc., for that purpose, well, what would be ready at the moment, please? Who would like to answer? Who's best placed to answer that? Would that be Lord Agnew or?
There we are.
Apologies, Chair. We lost your connection. Okay. Can you hear us now?
Yeah. Sorry, Karen. Sorry about that.
What I was going to suggest is that we have which I don't have actually at my fingertips, but there is a very good schedule of each of the sites with the number of lorry movements it's capable of handling on a daily basis, and we will attach that to the minutes of this hearing, so that you can see the name of each site, the number of lorry movements, where it is, and that it substantially exceeds the 7,000 that you were referring to earlier. So, and they are largely either ready now or moving quickly. So, for example, I had a briefing yesterday on one of the sites where the delay is the erection of acoustic fencing. That is just literally a job for some contractors to get on the site and put the stuff up. that'll take a week, 2 weeks. But I will give you a list of each of the sites in or near to Kent and their lorry movement capacity per site, just to give you, I hope, reassurance.
Thank you, Lord Agnew. That would be very helpful. But in terms of this level of detail, though, I know that the more granular we get, and I know this as a former serving minister, you don't know every very detailed questions, but your officials who've joined you, I think, will understand the detail of that. So could I ask whoever's most appropriate to answer that question to contribute to the discussion as to, of these additional pieces of infrastructure, how ready are they in order to accommodate what could be a very large number of trucks that need to be located if the app system is not up and running and working as it should be?
Hello, Chair. We're just losing connection here. Yeah. So we absolutely. Yeah. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So as I said, so the transit sites for Kent that were up and running for no deal, so that's Ebbsfleet, Ashford Waterbrook and North Weald, are all up and running and ready. And then the two that we are pursuing in addition to that from the HMRC perspective are Sevington with DFT and Warrington. And those sites are all on track to be ready. And as Lord Agnew says, the message very clearly, alongside having the sites up and running and ready to process all these facilitations, is that the message continues to be, as your witnesses said at the last session, the message to the supply chain is get the paperwork ready before the lorry actually sets out. And so it's a dual approach of making sure the infrastructure is there in place to process documents, but also get the message very clearly that these documents need to be done before people travel, supported by the check-in HGV is border ready.
Yeah, no, I understand that point. Well, look, thank you very much for that. I'm alas out of time. I need to move on. But I think, Lord Agnew, it would be very helpful for us to take you up on your offer. And I think what would be useful to know would be specifically for, certainly for Dover, but perhaps for other ports as well. But for Dover, to know what the capacity is at the various infrastructure sites that you're envisaging coming on stream, and also for each one of them, what the state of readiness is. Whether it's literally about to come on stream, and what the estimate of when those sites will actually be up and running is. That would be extremely helpful. So thank you very much indeed for your answers to those questions. And I'm now going to go to Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Lord Agnew, you said that, I think you said the French are not as ready as we would like. Could you just tell us a little bit more about the ways in which the French are not as ready as you would like?
No, I don't think I said that. I said that I don't have visibility of their readiness.
And that's quite important, though, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. Absolutely.
So what are your list of concerns about French readiness that you would like to have greater visibility of?
Well, I think it's simply reassurance that they're ready. I'm concentrating, my job is to ensure that HMRC are ready, and that's what I'm trying to do. But I don't have a remit to engage with the French, but I believe the French ambassador visited very recently the Short Straits and had a very constructive visit and meeting with key members of the Short Strait, I think Dover or Eurotunnel. But I do think it's an important part of the equation, but I don't have a remit over that.
Who does have a remit over that?
Well, it would be the broader border delivery group, I presume.
And who's the responsible minister for the border delivery group?
That will ultimately go to CDL, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
He's quite a busy man. I'm thinking he's quite a busy man then.
He's extremely busy. I mean, he's running EXO meetings on four times a week, where responsible ministers and officials are brought to those for cross-examination on their levels of readiness. And I don't sit on all of those because as I'm concentrating on HMRC, I won't be there for all of them. But that is the fulcrum of where these things are challenged and pushed.
Okay, perhaps I'll just come back to that, but I just want to go through one or two nuts and bolts issues first. We're going to need border inspection posts on both sides of the border if we're outside the customs union and outside the EEA, the EU. what visibility do you have about whether the French have got border inspection posts at or behind the border for Calais?
Well, I don't have visibility of that. I am aware that they have increased the capacity of their green lanes in Calais so that the flows of vehicles the volumes of vehicles can be increased. But I'm afraid I can't answer your initial question.
Okay, on Schengen passport controls, the reasonable worst case scenario says Schengen passport controls at the juxtaposed controls could continue to cause disruption until the French relax checks or add more capacity to undertake checks. So are we relying on the French to relax checks or to add more capacity, or don't we know?
I don't know. As I say, I'm focusing on our readiness here at the HMRC level. So, I think your questions are perfectly reasonable and important, but I think you're asking the wrong person now. So I'm sorry to duck the question, but
okay, that's okay, because I think, as you'll see, I'm going to kind of come to this point. I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm just trying to flesh out the issues in the public interest. What sort of assumptions have we made for how quickly the French process paperwork, and what sensitivity analysis have we done on that?
Well, I can't answer that, but I think, again, pragmatism would suggest to me that they're not going to want to restrict imports coming from them to us. The exports, if they are things they want, they're going to be pragmatic about it. So, it will come down to what the French want, really. As I say, this is outside my area of expertise entirely, but I think this is part of the reason why we hope to get some sort of a deal, because what that will mean is there will be goodwill to get over the sort of issues that you are perfectly reasonably raising. We don't want to go into a hostile environment in January, because that will make life even more difficult.
No, I've always been clear that I would like a deal of the kind which they suggested to us. But just then to come on to traders, because as somebody said earlier, we have had a number of false starts, and trader readiness is a subject extremely close to my heart. I don't mind telling the viewers that I nearly resigned at the beginning of 2018 because I was being prevented from going out and talking to traders about their readiness. It's been an awfully long time coming that we're now telling them to get ready in a big rush. So now we've got a new government, a government determined that we shall leave the EU. What level of certainty should traders have that we're going to be outside the customs union and therefore doing customs paperwork from the 1st of January? Is it 100% certain, or should they be in any doubt?
Well, I think I would go to 99%. 100% is above my pay grade.
Okay, but I was hoping you would say 100%, because we have now passed the point at which we can extend the transition, haven't we?
Yeah, I agree with you, but again, I'm focusing on the fact that we will 99% be out on the 1st of January, and I think any business that worked on a probability of hoping that the 1% would come true would be a very unwise business. Okay,
well, let's hope it's that latter point that's the headline, not the 99%, because I'm afraid some of my colleagues are going to now be worried about the 1%. I hope you won't mind me saying.
I do think you're picking at straws a bit. I mean, I could walk out of this meeting and go under a bus. I mean, what I can't say to you is something that is outside my control, but I can say to you something which any reasonable business could take on board, that this is going to happen. I mean,
so
that's
the message.
The point.
Okay, so I think we're all on the same page here, that what we want is the border to flow well, for traders to be able to get to and fro. And your message to businesses, I think, is clear, if I could play it back, that we are leaving the customs union. We're going to be doing customs paperwork. They need to get ready now.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, great. So just coming back to some of those points we made earlier about engagement with the French, visibility of various issues like Schengen border controls, BIPs. We've talked several times about transport. I think the evidence you've given us vividly illustrates something which I learned while in government and responsible for preparedness, is that the border is very complicated. The border spans multiple departments, and a point I would make is that there's, having been party to the Prosperity UK work on the Irish border, there is no substitute for detailed expertise, preferably career long, on this issue. And that is why I proposed to the Prime Minister on the day I famously didn't join the government that he should have a Minister of State for the border. But I think what you've told me is that, or told us, is that CDL is effectively the Minister for the border on top of all of his other duties. Is that right?
Well, I don't want to be misquoted, but that is the melting pot where all of the EU exit machinery coalesces. Borders essentially are an immigration matter for people, and so that would be the Home Secretary. But I think that it is about communication. I mean, how many people every week turn up at an airport to fly somewhere and forget their passport? That is the issue that I'm worried about. That traders will do the equivalent going to an exit port without the paperwork, and they'll be turned back as would happen to you if you went to an airport to fly, as indeed happened to my eldest brother on his first trip to Brussels as an MEP. He turned up at Stansted Airport without his passport when he got sent packing, and he didn't make that mistake again.
But Lord Agnew, you'll realise I'm a Brexiteer. I want this to be a success. I want the public to look at the border after we've exited the EU and say, thank goodness government, well, look how brilliantly government has succeeded in getting this done. But at the moment, I'm slightly concerned that unless Michael Gove were able to turn up and give us all the answers to some of the things which we reasonably are concerned about, things which will slow down the border, like how quickly the French do checks, the BIPs, the Schengen controls and so forth, unless Michael Gove could give us all the answers, we would have to sit here today and conclude that we didn't know whether the border was going to work. And I'm a bit concerned about that. Would you join me in saying that it would be a good idea to have a dedicated Minister of State responsible for all aspects of the border, who isn't, for example, also responsible for our coronavirus response across government, isn't also responsible for the negotiation and all of the many other things which CDL has to take on?
Well, I mean, you can't put words into my mouth. I'm not a cabinet minister. I don't have the ear of the Prime Minister on a regular basis. I've been given a job, which is HMRC border readiness, and that's what I'm trying to help ensure happens. So, I mean, in a theoretical world, what you're saying is a perfectly reasonable statement, but I've only been doing this job for a couple of months. It's taken every ounce of energy and brain power I've got to cover this mandate.
I'm sure.
You're asking me to comment on a whole lot of other stuff, which frankly, I'm not focused on.
No, that's fair enough. I'll draw things to a close there. I think people who've heard this will realise it's a subject dear to my heart, having been responsible for preparedness during a year in which I was not able to do all those things which I wanted. I just hope that traders have heard you and know they need to get ready now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Going to Rushanara now, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Lord Agnew, I wanted to focus on the reasonable worst case scenario and pick up on some of the questions from Steve and the chair. Chair mentioned that the new customs regime will come into play on New Year's Day. It's a weekend, and in Scotland, there's a fourth day, which is a bank holiday. Can you talk us through further on what the implications of that would be? And also, if there is gridlock from the word go, how quickly can emergency measures be triggered to close motorways, set up roadblocks, and forcibly stop traffic from entering Kent?
Yes, well, as I understand it, the retailers, the big importers, are pleased that the cliff edge date is happening at a weekend, literally after Christmas, when activity is at one of its lowest points in the year. So I think we could be reasonably confident that the volumes of movement around those first few days will be very low. However, as you say, we need to be ready for the reasonable worst case scenario. In Kent, they have just completed this hydraulic mechanisation of the motorway, so they can shut lanes in a much more efficient way than could have happened last year. And I don't have the full details, but as I believe, and again, correct me, team, if I'm wrong, but I think that system is now complete. and can be used, which will help. But I remain reasonably optimistic that those first few days of January will see relatively light volumes of movement.
Okay, so in the Cabinet Office report itself, there's an estimation of about 30 to 50% of trucks that might not be border ready when taking into account empty trucks and so on. And so that's a significant number. And the issue, I suppose, and it's already been raised, is that given some of the track record and some of the points you've made about in response to the chair's question about technology, such as apps not going according to plan, as we've seen recently with contact testing and tracing in relation to coronavirus, for instance, and that things can go wrong. And what you said earlier, that you're responsible for a particular agenda, particular part of the programme to ensure a smooth exit. That would you say that there is an issue around a lack of coordination across government then, that means that we could find ourselves in a situation where the reasonable worst case scenario could be very grave?
I mean, you're absolutely right to be worried about it. I completely accept that, and that is the whole point of this EXO structure, where ministers and officials are challenged literally on a daily basis. I'm just not giving you the full answer because I don't have the full answers, and I don't attend all of those EXO meetings. But can I just come back to give you a little bit of reassurance on the systems? But yeah. So the Smart Freight app, I'm sorry I haven't got its new name. It's been given a rather dull bureaucratic name. But anyway, the Smart Freight app has been built over a number of months, not under the sort of pressure that the people are under in the NHS. So this has had a reasonably long gestation period. And I think, again, this is not to be complacent, but we will get real-time feedback literally over the next few days on how good and what is the response from the industry as to its effectiveness. If we then look at the two other systems, we have Chief, which is it's a battle.
Sorry, Lord Agnew, we're losing your sound, I'm afraid. Are you still with us?
Yeah, it doesn't inspire confidence that government departments' technology failure is happening on this session, and we're meant to believe that the government's going to get a grip over exit day, and all of this is going to run smoothly.
Well, we don't know the causes of the gremlins in this instance, but do we still have Lord Agnew?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay.
So Lord Agnew,
I will try. I mean, unless you don't want.
Sorry, Lord Agnew, we've lost you again.
I'm here. I didn't want to speak over your colleague. But can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear. Thank you.
So yes, just so on the three, I think these are, and I'll defer again to colleagues on any more detail, but the three main systems for us are Chief, which is, as you will all know, is a very well-established system. It's been around for a long time. It's had a substantial upgrade to massively increase its capacity for transaction handling. That is already done and is working on a daily basis. CDS, which is the long-term replacement to Chief, again is a system that has been built and has been operating for over a year. It's being used by traders, albeit at very low volumes, but it's working. It's not. This isn't something brand new to be rolled out. And then the GVMS system, that has been out in beta with traders since about August of this year. So, but I will let Sophie just add a bit more flesh to the bones on those.
I'd like to my question. Sorry, I've got two more questions. So that's very helpful. Thank you. And if others want to write in to provide more detail, that would be helpful. Lord Agnew, the Cabinet Office paper in terms of reasonable worst case scenario shows that there's likely to be at least a two-day delay. And perhaps others can come in if necessary, but this is for you. Has HMRC made other authorities aware of the potential need to distribute hot food and drinks to people stuck in vehicles on motorways in the middle of winter at that weekend? And also, have you discussed needing temporary toilet facilities that will, and have they been reserved if we get a pile-up of thousands of lorries during that weekend?
Well, I can't answer those detailed questions, but certainly if you are a lorry driver, you have those facilities in your cab. I mean, not lavatory facilities, but you have cooking and basic and bedding and so on. In terms of, I'm sorry?
Who's thinking about lavatory facilities? Because there could be thousands, and you know.
Well, I know. I think it's a very that will be the people who are getting these sites ready. And you know, I mean, if I use Manston because I happened to visit it a year or so ago, so I understand the layout. And there were stacks of portaloos being built, and we will do the same. But that is a question for DFT. I'm sorry to not have the granularity on it, but it's a perfectly reasonable point. In terms of non-lorry drivers, so in other words, just ordinary citizens caught up in a snarl up on the motorway, I believe that the chances of that are much less because of the traffic management systems that the DFT are putting in place in conjunction with the Kent Resilience Forum.
Okay, my final question to you. In response to the chair's questions, you said that you talked about traders, you talked about businesses, and that the headline you want from this session is that they need to, you know, this is a shot across the bow. Is it now government policy to preemptively strike and blame businesses when 80 days out of the new customs regime coming into place, there isn't a deal to be seen? What there's likely to be, it could be a very thin one, which means that these preparations need to be done, and that is a responsibility of government. And today, you haven't been able to answer questions, many of the questions that the chair and Steve Baker have asked, and it doesn't inspire confidence with respect. And I appreciate you cover one area, but is there, as I say again, is there a strategy here to blame others and not take responsibility, because that's what it sounds like? And what's going to be done about giving confidence to the British people that they're going to get what they were promised, which is a frictionless arrangement with the European Union, and that their living standards and their livelihoods aren't going to be affected, and this is not going to be a massive disruption? Because you haven't inspired a great deal of confidence today with many of your responses.
Well, firstly, this is not about blaming anybody, but ultimately, the government can only do so much. And if businesses haven't engaged in the process and understood the processes from the 1st of January, then that has to be their responsibility. I completely disagree with you that I'm trying to apportion blame. Absolutely not. What I'm trying to do is get businesses to wake up and realise that they have, as you say, only 80 or so days left to do it. Now, one of the worries I had a couple of weeks ago was that there wouldn't be sufficient customs intermediary capacity to be ready to support these traders, but I'm now reasonably confident that there is that capacity. So what we are simply asking businesses to do who trade with the EU is to get ready. And if you want to say I'm blaming people, well, that's your interpretation, but I absolutely reject it.
Businesses are not satisfied. The government has yet still left a great deal of uncertainty. They've had to deal with a recession caused by COVID. They've had to deal with significant uncertainty, and they expect the government to give them clarity. They've been asking for that for years. On this committee, we've had business after business saying the government clarity. They need to know what it is exactly they need to be doing. There's a great deal of uncertainty and a lot of things up in the air still.
Well, I mean, we are negotiating a very large treaty with a large organisation in the shape of the EU, and the EU have form on taking these things to the wire. So, you know, that's not our choice. We've been trying to get the deal over the last few.
Nothing to do with the government. It's business and EU's fault, nothing to do with the government. The government's doing everything as it should be.
You want to interpret everything I say as blaming other people. I'm just trying to give you the real politic of the situation. I mean, you seem to inhabit a kind of magical world where all these things happen automatically. They don't. You know, we are in the middle of a very difficult negotiation with the EU.
Delivery on what was promised to them. That's not what's happening. That's not magic. That's about asking the government to deliver what was promised. People were promised they can have their cake and eat it. You can't seem to deliver cake, never mind magic, it seems.
Well, unfortunately, coronavirus has caused a great deal of disruption for everybody's lives this year, traders, the EU and ourselves.
There's coronavirus as well, but we can add that to the list.
Well, yeah, I know you're determined to create the narrative that I'm apportioning blame to other people.
I'm not creating any narrative, Lord Agnew. You are, which is it's every other thing, every other institution to blame. The government does need to take some responsibility, and what we're calling for is some leadership and cross-government working. You've sat here today and talked about what you're responsible for. You're not responsible for other things. Appreciate that, but we do need to see cross-government responsibility, and perhaps it's the Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster who is in this meeting today to be able to answer some of these questions. I'm going to stop there, but this is not satisfactory.
Okay, thank you, Roshanara. Can I move on to Anthony, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I should just declare at the outset that when I was Director of Policy Exchange, one of my trustees was the then unennobled Theodore Agnew, now Lord Agnew, who I can't see on the screen because of the tech issues. I want to focus on the technological issues that have been touched on a bit earlier. But beforehand, I just have one general question, which is, as you pointed out, we're in the middle of a big negotiation. We don't know whether we're going to have a deal. We don't know exactly what the details of the deal will be. When we do have a deal or not a deal, and we know what the deal is, how might that change the preparations needed? We're clearly not going to be in a single market. We're not going to be in the customs union, but we may or may not have tariffs, etc. Are you going to need to change what you're doing once we know what the outcome is?
Yeah, it's a very important question, because one of the slightly perverse worries that we have is if we do get a deal, that the trading environment will think that it's the equivalent of just rolling forward the transition period, which of course it isn't. We are leaving the customs union, whatever happens. So whether we have a deal or not have a deal. So it's a very important message to get out there in the hope that we do reach some kind of accommodation in the next couple of weeks. If we do get a deal, all that happens in a very simplistic sense is that all the different tariffs, and there are some 15,000, will be set to zero or whatever the deal might be. So the paperwork, the processing still needs to happen on the basis that we are leaving the customs union. So I think it's an extremely important point, and I do hope that might get out there.
Thank you. So on the IT preparedness, you've touched on a bit of it, but I understand there are actually 5 new IT systems that need to be put in place as a result of Brexit. There's the Customs Declaration Service, the Safety and Security GB, the Import of Products, Animal Food and Feed System, the Good Vehicle Movement Service, and then Smart Freight. And we've touched on 3 of those. Is that right? Is there more you're doing? And how confident are you that all those systems are actually going to work on January the 1st?
Well, I've talked about the ones which are HMRC ones, and unless, would you like some more granularity on those, which I can defer to?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Why don't I come in on that? Thank you. So as Lord Agnew referred to, we have the main customs platforms that we use are Chief, which, as Lord Agnew says, is a 25-year-old, well-known, well-regarded system that has been was tested for 300 million declarations last October, and we are testing it fully to 400 million. And we have CDS, which we are making changes to for Northern Ireland to comply with the Northern Ireland Protocol. But it's worth saying that CDS is a live system. We have traders using it today. In terms of the main new system for us in HMRC, it is this GVMS, the Goods Vehicle Movement Service. And that's what allows us to do customs controls at the so-called roll-on, roll-off ports, where it's really vital that that we don't impact flow. But in all of this as well, it is worth remembering, in light of earlier questions, that one of the important things we are doing for January, for both for traders and for flow, is to stage in the import controls. So the vast majority of goods coming into the UK from the EU will not have to fill in full import declarations. But as I say, the systems are ready and will be ready to support all of those processes for January, and then for July when we bring in full import declarations.
So is the GVMS system, the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, is that actually being tested now with real businesses?
Yes, exactly. So that we sent out the specs over the summer. The test environment was up and running in August, and that is we are testing as we speak with the carriers and the hauliers. So it is being tested as we speak with the third parties.
And now, just my specific question to the Minister, Lord Agnew, is how confident he is that actually all these systems are going to work when they're meant to work. You know, as various people have touched on before, we've had many government IT failures.
Yeah, I mean, I have a high level of confidence. I can't speak for one or two of the others because I think they're DEFRA systems. So I don't want to and I'm sorry to silo my responsibilities. But the three that we have, the Chief, the CDS, and GVMS, I have a very high level of confidence because actually they are existing systems and they are already out there. I think CDS was actually built 2 or 3 years ago, and it is this is not a brand new system, so it's well understood. So no, I am confident that these systems will work satisfactorily from the 1st of January.
Now, we heard from the Port of Dover earlier, who were talking about the French equivalent of the GVMS, and which was operational before ours, and they suggested that the UK should just license the French system. That would be a lot quicker and easier and possibly cheaper. Did you consider licensing the French system? And if not, why not?
So I can take that if that is helpful. So we looked at the French system last year, and the judgment was made that GVMS was a better fit for the HMRC systems. And I think your witness also last session said that time had moved on since he made that comment, and the key thing was getting GVMS up and running, which is exactly what we are focused on.
So what are the main hurdles now to actually getting them all fully operational?
So as we've said, the specs are out, the test environments are up and running. The main thing now is making sure that all of the end-to-end testing works, and that we are providing full one-to-one service, which we are for all the big ports and carriers and hauliers, to make sure that they are comfortable at their side, that it all works seamlessly.
And what's the backup if the system does break down? Computer systems do break down. We've been finding that today during this evidence session. If they do break down, what's the backup? How will you actually make sure that the freight can carry on moving?
So the customs declaration systems, which are the main ones that we've talked about, Chief and CDS, those, as we say, have been running for some years, and they have well-established contingency built into the systems. For GVMS, we are using that for transit from January, giving us the 6 months into July for using it for customs compliance. That gives us some reassurance in terms of making sure everything is fit and ready. And GVMS, again, we are testing all the sort of system contingencies as part of the test environment over these coming weeks and months.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great, thanks very much, Anthony. I'm going to go to Angela now, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. We were told in our previous session, Lord Agnew, that for all of this to work, every part of it's got to work. And I appreciate that you're only responsible for part of it, but how confident are you that all of it is going to work? Because if even a bit of it doesn't work, that the outcome may well be this chaos at the border.
Yeah, well, I think that's extremely important. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it's a very, very important question, which is why we have created this EXO committee structure where you have one cabinet minister holding to account all parts of the system. I mean, well, let's be realistic. Now, this is a mammoth change for this country. It's the biggest change at our borders for, well, probably since 1992 and maybe right back to our entry into the EEC originally. So there will be disruption. As the example I gave earlier, people will turn up without the pet passport or with a passport that doesn't have enough months left on it, or all of these small, individually small things in aggregate will be disruptive and frustrating, and people are going to have to learn to live in the new environment. So I absolutely don't want to give you a kind of a bland assurance that everything will work well. But what I do see on almost a daily basis is the level of scrutiny and energy that is going in to try to ensure that these levels of disruption are kept to an absolute minimum. So I am sitting on not every of the EXO meeting, but quite a lot of them. I hear the level of challenge. I hear the work that's going on. So I am reasonably confident, but it's not going to be everyone. Those who didn't want to leave will enjoy the process in January of pointing out the things that haven't gone right. I mean, that's the brutal reality of it. But I believe, broadly speaking, we will come out in a reasonably orderly fashion.
Well, I think everybody wants the system to work, given that we are where we are, whatever their views on the original issues around Brexit are. Nobody wants chaos. But how sensitive do you think the overall system is to these small problems that you were talking about? Because when I'm driving on a motorway, if they slow up ahead, you can get yourself in huge traffic jams just for small variations in speed. And if you're in a traffic jam, you're disrupted. It doesn't matter in essence what caused it. So how sensitive do you think this system is, given its size and its complexity, to just small breakdowns?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. Only yesterday in one of the EXO meetings, we discussed we were being challenged on the overall capacity for port movements, and a figure of 47,000, I think, was the figure mentioned, and distributed across all of our port capacity. That is substantially more than is needed. But what will happen, as you reasonably say, is if some of it goes too much of it goes in one direction. And so we were discussing yesterday the possibility of improving the Smart Freight app to send signals to drivers so that they knew of disruption before they left their depots or on their journeys, so they could divert. So, but you're right, these are newly emerging threads of activity, and you can criticize us for not putting all this stuff in place earlier. I mean, that's a free hit probably, but these things are being worked on in real time, and I believe if people are sensible and pragmatic, that we can do as much as we can to minimize the sort of disruption that you are referring to.
Okay, on the 23rd of September, Michael Gove told the House of Commons that the border operating model will be published by the end of the month. In reality, it was only published on the 8th of October. Can you tell us what caused the delay?
Well, I can't tell you what the delay was, but I can assure you that we believe that to be the last major guidance to be issued. I'm sure there will be corrections and improvements, but that is the toolkit by which people should operate from now on.
This update meant that the 21 separate occasions where the model itself said more information will be made available in due course is now down to 13. When are those 13 sections when if business look at this model, this phrase, more information will be available in due course, appears? When will those 13 areas become 0 areas, so business trying to work with this model can know exactly what the guidance and the shape of it is?
I can't give you exact breakdown, but I suspect several of those will relate to a deal which will clarify items, but we are working as hard as we can to eliminate those those outstanding elements, literally week by week. I don't know whether my colleagues can add anything to that.
Well, perhaps I could, for the sake of time, perhaps I could just ask you if you would send us extra information about those 13 and when they're expected to be resolved. That would, if you could send us written information, that would be very helpful. Could you sort of say to us why the government is still chopping and changing the border operating model when there are only 3 months to go to the January the 1st when it's meant to be fully up and running? And as we know, business do have to be able to know what it is and have tested it in their own systems ahead of that time.
Well, I suspect that the reasons are because the reality of previous iterations have been shown to need improvement. And we have listened to stakeholders who have said XYZ doesn't work properly. Why are you doing it this way when you could do it that way? So there is an iterative discussion going on. I accept that it's happening late in the day. I'm not going to defend that, but I think it's important that we are listening to people. So let me give you a small example. I was on a call with one of the senior management of Eurotunnel the other day. He said that we do want a scanning facility into GVMS, I think it is. Yes. Can we have it? I took that back to the head of IT in HMRC. We are working at pace to try and deliver that. Now, I can't guarantee that will happen by the 1st of January, but we will do everything we can to try to ensure that that is the case.
Thank you. When will the government be able to provide more information on which ports are going to use the temporary storage border model and which are going to use the pre-lodgement model? Because there are these two choices that any port can opt for.
I'll defer on details to my colleagues.
Of course. Thank you, Lord Agnew. So the decision on whether the ports use the GVMS or the temporary storage, or indeed they can use a mixed model, it is a commercial decision for the ports. As I said earlier, we're working very closely with them to help them make that decision. As soon as they have made that, we will issue that information out to traders as soon as possible.
Is there a deadline for them to make that decision? Since if you're a trader, it might make quite a difference as to which port you decide to use.
Indeed, because it's a commercial decision, it is for them to make. But as I say, we're doing everything in our power to get those decisions made quickly and then communicate that to the outside world.
Right.
It might be worth.
You can't say between now and. Sorry, Lord Agnew, you had an observation.
Yeah, I just.
Oh, you've gone again.
Sorry, Lord Agnew, we've lost you again. Can you hear us? No.
Well, Chair, I certainly hope the border technology works better than the Treasury's technology.
Yeah, let's just see. Is Lord Agnew with us? No. Okay. Did any of the?
Do we have anybody with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you're back. I'm sorry, Lord Agnew, we lost you there. You're back with us now, and we can hear you.
You were just about to make an observation, Lord Agnew.
Yes, sorry, just not a complete answer, but we announced the Port Infrastructure Fund last week, and the closing date for that is the end of this month. And I think that will give us a lot of clarity on which ports are going down which routes. But that, as you, I'm sure, know, will enable them to add capacity for them to provide the facilities for the on-site storage for in that route of customs handling.
Right, so you expect there to be much more clarity by the end of the month about which ports are using which models. That's what you hope.
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Thank you. There's an outstanding issue about exporting and importing plants, and obviously there are biosecurity aspects to all of that, which are very important to human and animal health. When will further guidance on exporting and importing plants be issued? Because at the moment there is none.
I'm afraid, I know you think I'm the chief ducker of questions, but that is a DEFRA question, but I will ensure we give you a written response in our follow-up document.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder whether, obviously, government can be quite siloed, but as we were talking about earlier, one problem in one bit of the system can lead to all of it to grind to a halt. And I suppose as a Treasury Select Committee, the economic potential for chaos for that to cause is huge. and it would be nice if we could maybe question the person who's got the full oversight of all of that, so we can get some answers to our questions. But Lord Agnew, I appreciate that that you've been very candid about your role in this, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Going to Julie now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And I'll address this to Lord Agnew, but if Sue or anyone else wants to come in on this, please feel free. I'm just thinking, Lord Agnew, you quite rightly said that you are very focused and you want companies to be prepared. If I was, the chief executive of a company and I want to start training my staff on how to fill out the forms for the customs checks, will the forms, or indeed the online systems needed to log in and view them, will they actually be available for me to enable me to look at the guidance and start training my staff?
Yes, that information is available. I'll let Catherine just give you a little bit more detail.
Thanks. So yeah, I think the first thing to say is that what we expect in general is that many traders and companies in practice will use an intermediary to do their customs declarations for them. That is what we have at the minute with our trade with the rest of the world, and we would expect that to be replicated, particularly because we know lots of small and medium-sized enterprises trade between the UK and the EU. So what we are firstly doing is making sure that we've got capacity in the intermediary sector, and that really importantly in our messaging to businesses, we are really clear about who the intermediaries are, where they can find them. There is a full list on gov.uk, so you can literally look at that list and find an intermediary to get in touch with. So that is the route through which we're expecting the vast majority of businesses in practice to fill in their customs declarations. However, if businesses do want to do it themselves, there is full guidance on gov.uk, for example, how to export, and it takes you through all of the steps to do that.
So can I just follow up and be very clear? Are you, in terms of the numbers, you mentioned numbers in terms of the micro businesses and VAT registered business, how confident are you that companies do have the guidance they need? And in terms of even numbers of those companies that you're still trying to get the communications across to, so that they are in control, I suppose, of their training and the guidance that they're working to?
Well, I think apart from the points I've made already about just being worried that there isn't enough engagement by traders, but on a slightly more...
Right, I think sorry, Lord Agnew, we've lost you again. Can you hear us? Okay. Did any of the officials want to come in the interim on the question that Lord Agnew was answering?
I don't know if Sue's still there. I don't know if Sue could perhaps answer.
Hi, Sue.
Hi. I think the basic message is that there is a great deal of communication with traders at the moment, that if traders want to go on to the HMRC website, they can see what a customs form looks like and they can follow the guidance there on how to fill one in. But that, as Lord Agnew was saying, for many traders, the better course of action is likely to be to use an intermediary.
Thank you. I don't know if we've got Lord Agnew back.
No, I don't think so. So it might be an idea maybe to ask some questions of the officials, but bear in mind, of course, they're not responsible for the policy. They're there to provide background information as such. So if you approach it in that spirit, I think that would be...
Yes, well, I presume Sue's the only one that can actually hear me at the moment, but in the House of Commons, this may not be something you can answer, so just please say so. The member for Denton and Reddish, who's Andrew Gwynn, asked Michael Gove when the guidance for food and drinks labelling would be available, and Michael Gove, not unsurprisingly, said that many of the details were still being negotiated. So I guess the question is when, in terms of the guidance, how much of the guidance is still dependent on the outcome of negotiations? Because that's still a big issue for companies to deal with, isn't it?
Well, I can answer in relation to customs how much is dependent on negotiations. You'll appreciate I'm a Treasury official, and I'm not responsible for negotiations on food and agricultural products. As far as customs is concerned, as we have already discussed, the core responsibilities, the core requirements relate to making customs declarations and so on, and those will be required from the 1st of January because the UK will have left the customs union and the single market. The negotiations that are going on customs relate to some trade facilitations and customs cooperation between UK and EU authorities. And some of those will provide some facilitations to traders. For example, both the EU and the UK are looking to achieve an agreement about mutual recognition of authorised economic operators. But the core message in relation to customs is that the requirements will be there whether there is an agreement, a free trade agreement or not.
So you feel that the guidance could be issued now on that? Is there guidance on that so that companies know exactly what they're dealing with now on that? You're on mute, Sue.
Sorry, Lord Agnew is coming back now, but I think in relation to customs declarations, the guidance is very clear that you need to prepare to do customs declarations.
Lord Agnew, are you back with us?
I hope so, yes.
Right, okay. We've got a rather splendid photograph of what looks like an idyllic holiday location, but we'll assume behind that you are there. There we are, we have you. Fantastic. Julie, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just finish off. Really, Sue was doing a great job of answering the questions. The final question I had was really, and I'll just mention it again, was that in the Commons, Michael Gove has said that many of the preparations are still dependent on negotiations. So in terms of the written guidance that companies have before them now to enable them to prepare for January the 1st, is really how much against the wire is it going to be for them? You're on mute now, so Lord Agnew.
There you go.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, got you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay? Yes. So yes, I think it is very frustrating, and the Prime Minister has said, you know, we need to know whether we have a deal or not by, I can't remember the date, the 15th of October, because we then have to do this preparatory work if there is a deal. And I mentioned earlier all these 15,000 tariff codes. You know, someone's got to go through all the systems and change those if we have a deal. So I think Michael Gove is right, but if at the moment we are simply preparing flat out for what we call the Australian deal, which is essentially not having a free trade agreement with the EU, I remain hopeful that pragmatism will prevail because it's not in their interest. It's not in anyone's interest for us to end up in an adversarial relationship with our nearest neighbours. So I remain optimistic that we can achieve something in the next week or two, but it is going to be very difficult because we're trying to coordinate sending out the right signals to businesses so they're ready, but not necessarily having all the answers.
So if I just finish off then, Lord Agnew, by saying, if I am the chief executive of a sort of a smallish company trading with the EU, you know, can you give me the confidence that I have, or I will have in good time, the guidance that I need to carry on with my trading after January the 1st?
Yes, because if they prepare on the basis of an Australian relationship from the 1st of January, they will be fine. If we get a deal, then that will be dialed back a bit and it will be a little bit simpler in some areas. But essentially, the architecture of what would exist in January will be exactly the same, whether we have an Australian deal or whether we have a free trade agreement.
Okay, I think my time's up, what with the technical difficulties, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And over to Felicity, please.
Good morning, everyone. My questions are on Northern Ireland. Lord Agnew, the Northern Ireland border model has not yet been published. Michael Gove said in the Chamber in July it would be ready within a few weeks. When do we expect it to be published, and what's the reason for the delay?
Well, I think it's an immensely complicated arrangement, and it's extremely sensitive, and so there is a great deal of sensitivity of announcing something that isn't completely ready. My focus has been on the TSS, the Trader Support Service, which we are rolling out at the moment, that will be there to support the Northern Irish traders from the beginning of January. We are talking to the Joint Committee, obviously, which oversees a lot of these arrangements, but I'm afraid I can't give you a date yet as to when that will be announced.
Now, unlike the border across the Channel, the checks in Northern Ireland will have to start on day one. Are you concerned here that we're running out of time? We've only got 80 days until January the 1st.
Yes, I am worried about it, particularly because of the huge sensitivities around it. One could not be anything other than be worried about it. But we have been very consistent in our commitment that there won't be checks at the border, and we just need to be as ready as we can. I mean, again, on perhaps a more positive note, if you are interested in this area, I would encourage you to have a look at a company called P2D, which produces a very good service for rules of origin and shows how you track goods, which is, I know, something that EU are very worried about. This is something that's going to be used by a lot of companies, or already being used, actually. And these are the sort of solutions that will be available to people. But I can't pretend that I'm not worried that we haven't nailed all this down.
So you've said that you are worried about it. What more, if anything, should government be doing at the moment?
I think we've got to get the TSS up and running as quickly as we can. That we have already had some 2,000 traders in Northern Ireland register with it for information and advice. So that is going up literally on a daily basis. We reckon we have a community of about 10,000 traders that we need to get to in time for D-Day, and as you say, that the more clarity we can provide on as much information as soon as possible has to be the overriding direction for us.
Now, the contract for the TSS was only awarded in September. Why did we award the contract so late? And are you confident that we are going to be fully operational, in that we are going to get the majority of those 10,000 businesses signed up?
I would say that I'm reasonably confident, but I am worried. You're right, the timing is very, very tight. And again, in a perfect world, this should have been stood up earlier. But there was quite a lot of debate about us monopolising an activity which the private sector should be providing. And so we agonised over that and made fair criticism to say, well, you agonised for too long. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. But in the end, we felt that this was the lesser of the two evils, to provide a comprehensive service. So the chosen bidder, the winning bidder, is a very powerful consortium of deep expertise in all the different areas that will apply and be there to support traders. But it is going to be a very close run thing to get it all up and running by the 1st of January, and I am very worried about it.
Now, the TSS website says that more training is coming soon for traders. When and will that be ready? And are you confident that traders will have enough time to become comfortable with the system?
I'm going to defer to Catherine just to give a bit more flesh on the bones for that.
I will speak loudly, if it's okay, because we are moving a device around at the minute. So I think the important thing to say is that as part of the consortium, the Institute of Export and International Trade are part of that consortium, and they're an existing provider of customs education. So we've already got some up and running training ready to go from their perspective. So I think that will really help. So the information on the website will give the latest details, but that training will be up and running very shortly.
Okay, thank you. In terms of trade from GB to Northern Ireland, will we be using the GVMS system? Again, are we confident that that will be ready by the 1st of January?
I let Catherine just, sorry, Sophie's going to come in on that one.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So as committee members will know, for trade from GB to NI, the protocol is really clear that Northern Ireland remains in the UK customs territory. We are administering some procedures on behalf of the EU. That's all done by the UK authorities. In practice, there's minimal administration for traders in the form of some electronic declarations and safety and security declarations. It's that specifically that the Trader Support Service will support them on. And yes, in terms of systems, we're using the CDS, the Customs Declaration Service, which is being amended for the Northern Ireland Protocol, and GVMS will also be used for that purpose.
Thank you. And just one final question. It's quite a specific question. The government's guidance states that there will still need to be checks for goods between Northern Ireland and GB to take account of international obligations, for example, the movement of endangered species. But if we're having no checks, how can we actually control that and ensure that no endangered species are moving between the border?
Well, I will stand corrected by my colleagues, but I believe we already do have some form of checks for controlled goods. Am I right in saying that? And so the idea is that we have to. It's a balancing act between meeting international obligations and causing internal division within the union. So I'm not going to pretend this is a simple thing, but Sophie, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you. Yes. So as you'll know, so the protocol commits to unfettered access between NI and GB. And what the command paper said in May is essentially that means no change to processes and checks from today. So the sort of minimal, the minimal checks that we have to do today for things like endangered species and the licenses that are all needed, that continues, but there are no new additional checks.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Felicity. I'm going to go to Harriet now, please.
Thank you so much, Mel. And Lord Agnew, can we focus now on people? And HMRC has been recruiting additional people to help with all these processes. Can you update us on how many additional staff HMRC has hired and how many that is compared to how many it needs?
Yeah, they estimated to need just over 7,000 additional staff for the 1st of January. At the last count, I think we were up to about just under 6,000, 5,800, I think, from memory. And I'm seeing a weekly update on how that recruitment is being added to the cohort and also how the training is being progressed to make sure that they are battle ready from the 1st of January. On top of that, there are contingent labour who are being hired for the manning of these actual physical sites. And I think we are looking for about 850 people for those to be in place by the 1st of January. And I'm confident that that is being managed in an orderly process and that we will have that resource in place for D-Day.
So what I'm hearing there is that this is an area where actually you're fairly confident that you're going to reach your target for January the 1st and that people will have had enough time to be trained in how to do these jobs.
Yes, you kindly asked me a question about something I have some visibility over.
That was my intention, yeah.
So no, I focused on this very early on, and I get a weekly update on numbers recruited, literally to ensure that we aren't going to be caught out.
So you're 100% confident that you will have the HMRC staff and that they will be sufficiently trained?
I never like saying 100% because I got into trouble with one of your colleagues earlier, but I'm at 99%, yes.
Okay. Turning to the border force, same question for them, because I imagine you have slightly less control over the numbers of border force staff, but can you update us in terms of what you've heard from colleagues on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to get my colleagues to give you an update there.
Of course, thank you. So as you rightly say, so the Border Force do administer customs at the border on behalf of HMRC. They're recruiting over 1,000 FTE this financial year. And of that, they are on track to have 670 in place for January and the remainder for July. Worth also, just for completeness, saying that this is on top of 900 they recruited last financial year, 300 for what they call their mobile readiness unit, and then 600 for their customs compliance work. And again, all reports from Border Force which come to Lord Agnew are that is all on track for this year.
And does that mean not just recruited, but also trained, sufficiently trained?
Quite right, yeah, recruited and trained.
Okay. Can I turn to vets? Again, you probably don't have direct responsibility for the recruitment of vets, but I think everyone knows we're going to need more vets in terms of export health certificates. Can you update us on what you're hearing from colleagues on the numbers of vets?
Yes, so again, on that, we are hearing positive progress is being made, but I suggest that we write to you with the specifics and we'll consult with our DEFRA colleagues to make sure we've got the precise numbers correct for you.
Because this is very important, isn't it? You absolutely need the vets. Exporters won't be able to get the correct documents in place to export these relevant items after January the 1st, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we need
so
to
this
get
could be quite a serious bottleneck.
So as we understand it, as I say, from our DEFRA colleagues, that is all on track. But again, I think it's best that we write to you with the specifics if we may, so we don't misquote them.
Yeah, just to reassure you on that, I was in an EXO meeting when the DEFRA Secretary of State was grilled on this about a week or 10 days ago. So, and he gave a very comprehensive explanation, but I don't have the numbers of vets to hand, so we will submit that to you as part of our written response.
Great. And can I ask about the prioritisation of day-old chicks and fish and shellfish from the Scottish harbours to make sure that they reach the relevant markets without any impediment? Do you have an update on your confidence level of that being achieved?
Well, it's called colloquially fish and chicks, you know, and it is a matter of high priority. But again, rather than ad lib on it, I'd rather give you a written response, because I know these are considered areas of particular sensitivity because of, well, for the obvious reasons. So do let us give you a proper written response on that.
And will that written response include the power to compel French authorities to let shellfish and day-old chicks skip the queues?
That was certainly something that was discussed in this EXO meeting that I was part of in the last few days, but I can't give you a specific answer on that, and I'll make sure that we do give you as clear an answer as we possibly can.
But what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have discussed it in the committee as an issue and a problem, and I haven't heard you say that you heard that they got it solved.
I think rather than use the word problem, I would say an area of specific focus. So I think, you know, it's one of these issues that has been moved to the top of the agenda as something that's pretty important and is being worked on. But again, because it's so important, I don't want to give you a sort of bland generalist answer. I'd rather get you the proper response from DEFRA to put into our follow-up with you.
Thank you. Turning now to customs agents and the number of customs agents in the market, can you give us your latest thoughts in terms of how many customs agents are going to be needed to ensure that the customs system flows smoothly for the companies that are not used to doing customs declarations?
Yes, as I mentioned to an earlier questioner, I was worried about capacity in the sector, and so we did commission a survey with Ipsos Mori, and they have spoken to some 500 intermediaries in the last week or two, and we are now reasonably confident that they have uprated their capacity to handle the increased volume. And I could give the example of one firm in particular who are doing a lot of very low value ones, but they are going from literally naught to nearly 100 million transactions. with systems that they have designed and put in place for January. So when I first arrived in this role in August, my initial concern was with the lack of trader readiness, that we made a lot of noise about that, and then we found there weren't enough customs intermediaries to pick up the slack. But I feel more confident now that there is sufficient capacity in the intermediary sector to handle this. And maybe one of the best indicators of that is that the prices being charged for the provision of the services have remained relatively static from our own market intel. So I think, again, it's very hard to be specific because it's not a regulated industry. We don't have registered numbers of intermediaries out there, but it's also a lot of quite small operators. I think we reckon that about 80% of them have less than 10 staff. So, it's a very fragmented industry. I think there's a plus there because it's easier to go from 10 to 20 people than it is from 1,000 to 2,000 people.
Another metric would be how much of the £80 million training budget for customs agents has been spent. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, not enough, and we've just written out again to exhort them to get on and draw down the money. There is this problem with state aid, which has limited the amounts that the larger firms can get, but I think I wrote out again in the last week from memory to exhort them. The other thing we're doing is we are disengaging the training element from the grants, because training is not subject to state aid in the same way that the general grants that we were originally offering is, and we have now written to the EU Commission. We don't have to get permission, we just have to write and tell them, which is what we've done, that we are tilting this more to a training grant rather than a general grant. So that I think will make a big difference. So
has any of it been spent?
Yeah, I'll get Catherine to give you more precise numbers. Yes.
So of the 84 million, it was released in two tranches. The first tranche was 34 million, and that was earlier in the year, and that has been fully spent. The second tranche was 50 million, and that was launched earlier in summer. Of the 50 million, the latest figures are that 18.4 million has now been applied for, and that's by over 1,000 firms have applied for that. Those numbers, though, are changing very fast, so they're changing daily and weekly, so we will be able to give you further updates as they increase.
Thank you. And Logistics UK gave our committee evidence to say that they thought that there were going to be perhaps 50,000 customs agents required, and that only half the supply of customs agents needed had come forward. Is that a good reflection of the current picture? So that particular number is not a number that we use or recognise, although it is certainly true that the number of agents will need to increase. And the issue is, as Lord Agnew was referring to, that the sector is actually very varied and diverse, and they use very different business models. So this is not necessarily just about recruitment. This is about innovation and about use of technology. So our grant funding that has been applied for, as I talked about earlier, businesses can use that in a number of ways. So they can use that for recruitment, but they can also use it for retraining and for IT. So you can see that they're using a number of different business models to achieve the capacity increase. But you're acknowledging that there will need to be more people in a trained position and competent by January the 1st, and that we're not there yet.
Yeah, it would be likely that there will need to be some new recruits, obviously, in the sector, but the 50,000 is not a number that we recognise or are tracking.
Do you have a backup plan?
Do you want me to answer that? Do you mean if we don't get that level of recruitment by the various DJs?
Yeah, if we don't have enough, and they're not trained enough.
I think what we're seeing is that, as Catherine mentioned, that the money that has come from partly from this grant system, but also investment by these firms, what they have done, they've uprated their technical capacities. So to take a sort of simple analogy, if one FTE could previously handle 50 applications a day, by improving their tech, that one person could now handle, say, 80. I'm making the numbers up illustratively, but I think we've seen a lot of technical enhancement in the sector over the last few months. And as I mentioned earlier, I've spoken both to Logistics UK and to the British Freight Forwarding Association, and they are seeing a lot of innovation going on, and they are less worried. I think you would find if you asked Elizabeth again, the witness you referred to, that she would be less worried than she was when she gave that evidence to you a few weeks ago.
I noticed you didn't mention the Road Haulage Association in your list of organisations just then, and I know that Michael Gove described them as not necessarily the most constructive partner at every stage in the conversations. How have they not been constructive?
Well, I mean, the brutal reality is that they are not big traders with the EU. They are an internal domestic association with less than 5 or 10% of their members who are regularly trading with the EU. So I think the two I've mentioned, and the reason I mention them is that they are more relevant to the issues that we are facing, which is moving across the border. And again, if you follow the logic of that, if you hire an Estonian lorry driver, he or she is going to be paid about half what a British lorry driver would be paid, and therefore those people doing a lot of trade across into Europe will use foreign lorry drivers. And so the RHA, whilst of course they're perfectly entitled to make whatever comments they want, I'm more interested in talking to the sectors who are more integrally involved in it.
Great. Well, I know that I'm running out of time, but when you'll follow up to us in writing, it would be helpful to know your perception of the current state of play in terms of customs agents compared to when Elizabeth de Jong gave us her evidence, which was a few weeks ago now.
Yes, we will certainly do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harriet. Going now to Siobhan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Lord Agnew, the government has announced that lorries will need a permit to get into Kent. Who's going to enforce this?
Well, I think, as my understanding, the permit is simply the Smart Freight app, which is so that if stopped by the police or other traffic management people in Kent, the driver can demonstrate that he or she has been cleared to go. Basically, it's a simple traffic light system. Red, go back. Orange, you go to a holding area because you're nearly got your papers in order. Green, head to the port, and that's and I believe the plan is that the driver will show that to the police or whoever, and if they're on red, then they get fined.
Is that the best use of the police's time to chase after lorries on the motorway because they don't have the right paperwork? And if I was a resident in Kent, I would think I wouldn't want the money that went to Kent Police to be used for this purpose. I'd want to know where the money was coming from.
Well, I think you would want it as a resident if it stopped the roads being completely gridlocked with lorries who shouldn't be there. So I think probably what will happen is that there'll be an intense campaign for the first month or so where a few lorry drivers, or maybe a lot of lorry drivers, haven't got their paperwork in order. They'll get stopped, they'll get fined, they'll have to trundle all the way back to Birmingham or wherever it is with a full load, get a rocket from their depot manager, and then they'll get their act together and they won't do it again. So I do genuinely think it's a very good use of police time over a limited period of time.
I tell you, in my area, I think my residents would want me to be more worried about street drinking and violence. But is the number plate recognition infrastructure in place to flag lorries that don't have the correct paperwork?
I don't think we're at a level of sophistication where you can link registration number to the Smart app readiness and then selectively stop them on that basis. IT may want to correct me on that, but I don't think we are there yet. But that is, of course, the nirvana that we will work towards, I'm sure, over the next, certainly months, maybe take longer.
But the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, they have ANPR cameras up and they can see. What work's been done on connecting with them about the possibility?
Again, I'm going to have to defer to DFT. I do know there was a discussion in an EXO meeting recently about special sorts of cameras that were going to be set up on the entrance to the, I think it's the M20 from memory, with exactly the sort of thing you have in mind. But I think it would be only fair to you that we gave you a bit more information in the written update, in written response.
How will the smart freight system pick up people taking goods in vehicles other than lorries?
Well, it's not designed for that. There are concessions that we are agreeing on vehicle loads in transits and so on. I can defer to my colleagues perhaps to give you a little bit of information on the concessions we're doing there. Would you just like to get a little bit of information on that?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Agnew. So, I mean, just to say that again, we'll get you the full details from our colleagues in P2D who are leading on the smart freight now. The check-in HGV is ready to cross the border, but my understanding is that they will have in this app, and as we've said, it is already being tested this week for people to have access to the system. That we will be using the APNR cameras and the vehicle registration identification. And then, as Lord Agnew says, from our point of view, when it comes to the facilitations, that is all set up in the HMRC infrastructure from the transit side. But specifically on readiness for the EU controls, that is where the check-in HGV is ready to cross the border is really important.
Thank you. How will the smart freight system deal with false negative flags, lorries that don't have a smart freight permit because they are entering Kent but aren't heading to the Dover border?
Yes, so again, I think it is the best idea is that we can give you that in a written form from Cabinet Office who are leading on the development of the smart freight now that check-in HGV is ready to cross the border.
Yeah, and how can a Kent permit tell if a driver has filled in their paperwork correctly as well as filled it in at all?
So that is all part of the system check. The driver can check against the app as to what they need to have completed. They then self-certify that that is correct, and then the permit is issued. But again, I think best that we've got some very good description from the Cabinet Office with what they are setting up. So we will send all of that to you in writing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. They're my questions. I'd be worried if I lived in Kent.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Siobhan. And that brings us to the end of this session. And can I thank everybody who's contributed on the panel today? It's been a very useful discussion. There are some very big issues clearly here and some very big challenges and a great deal at stake. And in terms of those challenges, clearly, as I think we've identified and we know, a number of them are externalities, which government sadly is not going to have much control over in terms of the things we're discussing. And one thinks there of the long-term ongoing uncertainties that there have been, for example, around the negotiation with the EU 27, the coronavirus, of course, and how the French may or may not respond as we go forward beyond the end of this year. There are, however, lots of areas that we are in control of, and I think this session has probably thrown up quite a few outstanding questions that the committee has. And I think we should recognise, however, Lord Agnew, that we have gone into areas and asked you questions which are outside of your remit, and we appreciate the fact that you've agreed to write to us on a number of those particular matters. We've also asked a number of very detailed questions which probably the officials were sitting on the sidelines anxious to answer, but we probably didn't have time to come to you at those particular points. And thank you again, Lord Agnew, for agreeing to write to us on a number of those points. There have been a number of points where I think, Lord Agnew, you have accepted that you are quite concerned about these areas, and one thinks about Northern Ireland, trader readiness, how ready the customs agents are as well. And whilst we've had many helpful answers in this session, I think it's fair to say that a number of questions, I think, have arisen in our minds as we've gone through this session. So I think it would be appropriate for the committee to write to you having reflected on this session and set out further questions that we may find useful to put to you. And I'd be very grateful if you would be happy to respond to that and to do so really as quickly as you are able. But thank you again, Lord Agnew, for having appeared before us, and thank you everybody actually for battling away with the technology issues that we confronted. It's one of those things in life that we seem not to be able to avoid, and we hope happens as infrequently as possible, particularly in the context of the kind of matters that we're discussing today. So can I conclude by thanking you very much indeed for your time, both to Lord Agnew and also to the very helpful responses we've had from officials as well. And that brings us to the conclusion of this session. Order, order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much.
Treasury Committee.